Hello, non-feminist men and women of the world. This is Monday, the 24th day of August, 2015. Welcome to episode 60 of the Vanguard Report. The Vanguard Report is where we tell you what feminism really is. In other words, we tell you what feminism will not tell you. A feminist will never tell you what feminism really is because that would give the game away. Fact is, the truth about feminism will hardly bear looking into. It's nasty, it's shameful. That is why any feminist, knowingly or unknowingly, will misdirect you and send you down the wrong path of knowledge. That is why we must make our non-feminist journey of discovery under our non-feminist authority with our own traveling papers. Feminism is what we say it is. It's not what a feminist says it is. That much is a foregone conclusion. Feminism is what we say it is. And the feminists can go huddle in their own little corner and say what feminism is amongst themselves, amongst other feminists, but that carries no authority among the rest of us. Every non-feminist definition of feminism is only a starting point on the journey of discovery. Did you catch that? Every non-feminist definition of feminism is only a starting point on the journey of discovery. And there are plenty of definitions of feminism that illuminate the nature of feminism in one way or another. Feminism is a multifaceted thing, for certain. All roads lead to Chicago, right? You can start from Milwaukee, you can start from Fort Wayne, you can start from St. Louis. Hell, man, you can even start from Helsinki or New Delhi. The scenery along the way will vary quite a bit, but if you point yourself consistently in the right direction, Chicago is where you'll finally end up. The process of explaining feminism is 1% definition and 99% description. As I say, the definition can vary, but the journey of discovery is always the same. You define, and then you descriptively place that definition into context by offering up one illustrative example after another. All right, I am Fiedelbogen. I am your host for episode number 60 of the Vanguard Report. We skipped a week last week due to circumstances temporarily beyond our control. So we're back again. This is episode 60. Once again, it's just me, Nick Redding, my co-host, man of Canada, true son of the Alberta Prairie. He is again not with us. I think he will be back next week, but for now he is away on business and couldn't make it. So everybody be sure to visit Nick Redding's website. Oh my God, I think we're getting some background noise, maybe a little bit. Sorry, it's beyond my control. Okay, seems to have gone away for a little bit. Be sure to visit mensrightsedmonton.com. I'm giving a plug for Nick Redding's website. Uh-oh, that noise again. Oh no, I hate it when this happens. There's not a damn thing I can do about it. Anyway, mensrightsedmonton.com. That's the website of the Men's Rights Edmonton Project, way up there in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. They do all kinds of good work up there. They get up to all kinds of creative, revolutionary mischief up there. And when you go to the website, look for the contact information. And if you're in Edmonton or plan to be in Edmonton, or you know somebody in Edmonton and you can pass the word along to them, well, consider meeting up with Nick himself there in Edmonton. You want to talk about things non-feminist, anti-feminist. You want to talk about the resistance, Nick is your man. So, let's cut right to the chase here. Cue number one. We're going to talk about stories and articles, headlines, and so on, like we usually do. Top of the cue list today is cue number one. This is from the land down under. This is from Brisbane, Australia. Brisbane teacher wins scholarship to develop program to reduce domestic violence. Coward punches. A coward punch is the latest new word they just come out with. It means what we call a sucker punch. That's where you just hit somebody suddenly with no warning. In this case, in the head. That's a sucker punch or a coward punch. Down in Australia, they've always called it a king punch because you're hitting them in the crown, I guess. But anyway, now they're taking to calling this kind of action a coward punch. And this is new politically correct terminology. And for once, I agree with politically correct terminology. Uh-oh, the noise again.
Hey, like it's not that bad, man. Just keep rolling.
It's not that bad. Good. Thanks for the feedback there. It's hard for me to gauge from my end what it sounds like on the other end. So anyway, yeah, I like that coward punch. I think it is cowardly. And I think that's a good word to describe that kind of hitting. So, yeah, coward punch it is. But let's get into the article here. Here we have at the beginning a photograph of a man who has a kind of a sideways resemblance to Hugo Schwitzer. He really does. It doesn't look exactly like him, but there's something in the expression in the facial set that says Hugo Schwitzer. And I'll leave it at that. A Brisbane teacher who wants to reduce domestic violence and coward punches, there we go, coward punches, says dads need to step up and mums need to step back. What does he mean by that? Well, let's keep going. Moreton Bay Boys College deputy head Damien Barry, once again the name is Damien Barry, has been awarded a Churchill Fellowship to develop a program to help teenage boys develop into good men. Okay, now pay attention to the next paragraph. He has already created a fledgling program at his college called the Good Men Project. The Good Men Project, I trust that a lot of my listeners have heard the phrase Good Men Project before, because that's the name of a notorious website that's been on the internet for several years, the Good Men Project. Now, is this Damien Barry aware of the website Good Men Project? Is he affiliated with that website? I don't know. But it is intriguing that they got the same name. The Good Men Project. Okay, the Good Men Project, which focuses on creating a community of strong, compassionate male role models for the students. I'm going to guess that this guy is actually in correspondence with the people who run the Good Men Project website. I can't believe this level of coincidence. All right, men need to teach men, he said. This is Damien Barry talking here. Men need to teach men, he said. They need good women in their lives. We can't just leave them to the women. All right, I agree they need good men in their lives. We can't just leave them to the women. I have no problem with that. The project encouraged fathers to engage in school life and provided training for male teachers to understand their own masculinity and teach boys about theirs. All right, starting a social engineering pilot project here to mix the personal with the political and teach people about their masculinity through the public school system. Somehow boy, that chaps my hide. There's something I don't like about that. All right, here we go. He said, Damian Barry said, domestic violence was, quote, all about men, unquote. All about men. Domestic violence was all about men. It's overwhelmingly blokes hitting families, not the other way around, he said. All right, now we see what's going on. This article is from August 9th, 2015, so this is less than a month old. This is not something from 10 years ago, folks. This is happening now. You see, this stuff just keeps rolling, keeps rolling, and keeps rolling. What's going to make it stop? So here is this person here repeating feminist propaganda about men, the idea that men are overwhelmingly the initiators of domestic violence. 95%, according to the standard narrative, of domestic violence is initiated by men. There is not only no good evidence to support that, there is a considerable amount of evidence to support the opposite conclusion, or the contrary conclusion, that it's symmetrical. Men and women are both about equally violent in domestic and intimate partner relationships. And yet they keep going on and on with this feminist propaganda. It's like it's a machine with no off switch in perpetual motion. It just doesn't stop. How do we shut it down? Well, that's what we're here to figure out little by little. Damian Barry. That's the guy's name, of the Moreton Bay Boys College in Brisbane, Australia. Now let's see if I can get back on track with the article. It's overwhelmingly blokes hitting families, not the other way around, he said. And it's not just domestic violence. It's about helping boys make the right decisions when they get a little bit older. Right decisions like what? Like what career they're going to have, that sort of thing. They're tying this whole life program into the question of male violence. Boy, it sounds like they got men covered from cradle to grave there, don't they? They want to instill responsible manhood in boys and men. Yeah, it sounds nice. Sounds very edifying. Everything from reducing risk-taking behaviors to coward punches to getting on the grog and getting into fights. Here we go. Men are a bunch of violent bastards. Men are the problem. That's the narrative that they're advancing here. The fellowship will pay for his travels to see similar programs in America and other countries. We want them to understand their strength and masculinity is a gift they need to use to nurture rather than to hurt. Mr. Barry hoped the program would eventually be used nationwide to teach young men to care for their community and loved ones. Okay, this is clear. This is, again, propagating the message that men are pieces of shit, that men are violent bastards. Men are no good. Men are the problem. This is the central feminist message, and that message keeps cropping up over and over and over again. No matter how many times we call that into question, no matter how many examples we offer up to show that women are the problem, people are the problem, problematic people are the problem. But no, the feminist narrative is that men are the problem, that most of the bad things in this world flow from a male source. And that idea is poison. It's pure poison. It is evil. And it's as good an example as any that I can think of why we have to do something about feminism, why feminism is the problem. And this guy, this Damian Barry, that's spelled Damien, and Barry spelled with an A, Barry, at Moreton Bay Boys College in Brisbane. This is our fine, upstanding pillar of society who wants to propagate the feminist message. He is the donkey, the jackass, I should say, for feminist propaganda. Nowhere does the word feminist or feminist appear in this article. He doesn't say he's a feminist. I suppose the reporter didn't ask. I would like to know if this guy describes himself, labels himself specifically as a feminist. That I don't know. But feminism needs to be labeled and pointed out wherever it occurs in this world. Not only feminism directly, but feminism indirectly in terms of its consequences and its domino effects, its knock-on effects. There's a lot of unconscious feminism out there in the world. A lot of people out there who are feminists in all but name, people who have gone through their life like the fish swimming through the water, the cultural water, I mean, and they have absorbed feminism, feminist ideology, feminist thought patterns through their gills, so to speak. Feminism has certainly made inroads into the collective consciousness. And this is something we need to point out until the collective consciousness becomes, well, conscious of itself and conscious of what it is and what it was and what it has become and what it is becoming. So this guy here, some people would look at this Damien Barry, the headmaster of this Moreton Bay Boys College, and they would say, man, what a white knight mangina piece of shit. Okay, that's what some people would say. Okay, that's what some people would call this guy. Just pointing this out. I'm not saying that this Damien Barry is a white knight mangina piece of shit, but I am pointing out that there are some people who would say that. Okay, and I think that I can sort of understand why those people might say that. I can feel them. I can feel where they're coming from and what moves them to say those kinds of things. And yes, there are a lot of people out there who would say that Damien Barry of Moreton Bay Boys College, Brisbane, Australia, is a white knight mangina piece of shit. But, I mean, that's just a little heads up there. A lot of people think that way. So much for the article. It was a short article, but I think very illustrative. Well, whether we like it or not, we are involved in a war. If you're afraid to use the word war for fear of sounding violent, aggressive, then a good euphemism would be essential conflict. Okay, essential conflict. We're involved in an essential conflict. But either way, whether you call it a war, whether you call it an essential conflict, it's an unlovely contest, and it is a struggle to prevail. And that's the difference between war and argument. In argument, you're trying to convince somebody, to persuade somebody to change their mind. War is what happens when argument is impossible. Somebody's trying to impose their will on somebody else, and that somebody else is trying to block the first party from having this other person's will imposed upon them. Wars generally have an aggressor and an aggressee. Well, wars of aggression do. Anyway, just between ourselves, we don't need to mince words. We can call things by their names, and we call this thing that's happening a war. Okay? It is a war. I think that's an appropriate word for it. Not only a war, but it is a war of aggression. Yeah. Lucky for us, we didn't start it. We are not the aggressors. That is important to bear in mind. We are not the aggressors. Certainly, it's high time We took the offensive and gained the initiative. But never forget, we did not start this war. We are not the aggressors. We, the non-feminist world, we're not the aggressors. In the early 1960s, feminism came to life again after a dormant spell which lasted roughly half a century, and that's when the aggression was kick-started back to life again. Feminism has rolled uninterrupted ever since then, evolving from one shape to another shape to another shape, and we have seen nothing but one feminist aggression after another. Indeed, aggression, or even microaggression, is the normal feminist mode of transaction with the rest of the world. Virtually every feminist move is feminist aggression in one form or another, meant to shove some portion of the world aside so that feminism can occupy more space and prepare to shove more of the world aside so it can occupy more space, and so on and so on. This feminist war of aggression is not slated to end anytime in the foreseeable future. It has been nothing but feminist aggression against the non-feminist sector. But sometimes the non-feminist sector pushes back. And when that happens, there is a name for it: anti-feminism. Or if you like, you can say counter-feminism. Feminist aggression provokes non-feminist counter-aggression. In other words, feminism creates anti-feminism. More feminism will lead to more anti-feminism. And more anti-feminism will lead to more feminism, which will lead to more anti-feminism. Got to break the cycle down somewhere. I say feminism is a problem. If we're going to break the cycle, we have to address our efforts at feminism, not at anti-feminism. Feminism creates anti-feminism, and that is what it boils down to. And then feminism plays the victim. Political Darvo. Anyhow, let's explore the words feminist, non-feminist, and anti-feminist. What do these words mean? What is the difference between them? Well, feminist means feminist. That's easy enough. And non-feminist means not feminist. Again, easy enough. Now, let's look at anti-feminist. Anti-feminist means opposed to feminism. Okay? That's all it means. It just means opposed to feminism. So, when was the last time you met a feminist who was opposed to feminism? Has it been a while? Well, I figured as much. So, clearly, if you are anti-feminist, you must also, ipso facto, be non-feminist. One sees that's logical. Therefore, every anti-feminist you meet is also non-feminist. But is every non-feminist anti-feminist? That's a very interesting question. And being the pragmatic thinker that I am going to offer up a novel point of view here. I say, yes, every non-feminist is also anti-feminist, because every non-feminist effectively opposes feminism. That's right, both anti-feminist and non-feminist oppose feminism. Non-feminist opposes feminism passively. Sometimes the passive approach is useful. Anti-feminist opposes feminism actively. Sometimes the active approach is useful. And yet, an anti-feminist is no less of a non-feminist simply for opposing feminism actively rather than passively. By the end of the day, all that matters is that they both oppose feminism. Both non-feminist and anti-feminist oppose feminism, whether it's actively or passively. Or to put that another way, both non-feminist and anti-feminist exist in opposition to feminism. They exist in opposition. Yeah, man, it's existential. They both exist in opposition to feminism. In the long run, non-feminist carries the same political weight as anti-feminist because all opposition to feminism has the same existential value. It all interferes with feminism one way or another by roadblocking it and slowing it down, whether actively or passively. It's all an impediment to feminist plans. The difference is that anti-feminist seems to imply an active adversarial stance, whereas non-feminist seems to imply live and let live. The kicker is that live and let live has got to be a two-way street. And feminism is absolutely incapable by its very nature of living and letting live. To allow even 1 inch of space in this world that is not feminist is to admit in principle that non-feminist people and things have an inherent right to exist in the first place. And that throws the entire feminist project into question because it radically undermines the basis of feminist triumphalism. Feminist triumphalism, the idea that feminism is absolutely, categorically, and objectively right beyond all further discussion for all time, the attitude that feminism is absolutely, categorically, and objectively right beyond all further discussion for all time. Yeah, that's feminist triumphalism. So, no, feminism cannot live and let live in relation to the non feminist sector. Feminism's end game is to make feminism the only game in town. And clearly, permitting a different game to exist in town at all would negate that purpose. Now, you might wonder, what's the point of being non-feminist anyway? If you oppose feminism, why not just call yourself anti-feminist and be done with it? Okay, fair enough. My reply would be that if you declare anti-feminism to be your position, then you assume an adversarial stance which can be construed as aggression. Anti-feminist can be construed as aggression. Now, we all know that feminism is the primary or predominant aggressor. We all know that feminism started this war the minute it came into existence and started spreading hysterical lies and slanders like, men are violent, that sort of thing. And we all know that as non-feminist men and women, we get this. We are punching up, and feminism is punching down. We know this. Feminism has decked us, whether we like it or not. And we got to throw off feminism. And being in the down position, we have to fight pretty aggressively to overcome the natural advantage that the guy in the up position has got. Feminism is punching down, and we are punching up at a disadvantage. And we're doing this against a professional victim. Yeah, political Darfur. And yet, feminism has a superlative genius for playing the victim. That's right, for playing the victim, mostly by spin control. They'll take any situation where there's a conflict and spin it so that they are the victim, or that feminism is the victim, or that women in the abstract are somehow the victim. That's how they do it. That's political Darvo. Whenever a conflict with feminism arises, the feminists will construct the story as a threat narrative. They will situate themselves as the victim and the other side as the perpetrator, even if the truth is exactly opposite. They are very, very good at this, chillingly good. They've perfected it to the level of a martial art. It's that political Darvo. It's a kind of jujitsu. So the non-feminist position undermines that entire game. It makes it hard for them, the feminist side, to play the victim and leaves them with little choice but to back off and leave you alone, or, barring that, to make a move which can only be interpreted as aggression on their part. If you take the non aggressive, non oppositional, non feminist position, there's really only two things they can do. They can just leave you alone, or they can move against you. And if they move against you in any way, even if it's just in the form of argument or telling you that you're wrong, that you should be a feminist, or you don't understand feminism, or there's something bad about you because you're not a feminist, that every good person is a feminist in some way, that's aggression. Anything like that is aggression. They make that kind of move against a person who just says, no thanks, I'm not a feminist, then they have committed aggression. They are committing a war of aggression against you. And it's pretty hard for their action in that context to be interpreted as anything other than aggression, given that you have not put up any kind of aggression against them, at least in theory, if you played your game right. So you see how simple this is? All we're doing is setting them up so that they cannot play the victim. If you do this right, you're setting them up so that they cannot play the victim. And if feminism cannot play the victim, then it can no longer effectively function. They've got to play the victim. That's the basis of their aggression, is playing the victim. And if they can't play the victim anymore, they can no longer function. They are not accustomed to living in a script which they do not control, a script where they are the aggressor. All you must do is quietly declare that you are not a feminist. Quietly say, I'm not a feminist. And ask that your non-feminist boundaries be respected. You say, stop that, don't tell me that, don't use that terminology with me, please. Don't assume that I agree with you on that question or that point. Yeah, that's what respecting your boundaries is, respecting your intellectual boundaries. That's one kind of boundaries that they need to respect. You're asking them to respect your non-feminist boundaries because you just want to live a peaceable non-feminist life along with other non-feminist people, and you don't want any trouble from the feminists. So if you are a feminist and you give non-feminist people any trouble, they will then thereupon have no choice but to band together in their own interest to converse amongst themselves about the feminist problem, and finally to begin to formulate plans to do something about the feminist problem, one step at a time, one day at a time. Feminists, pay attention here. The more you aggress against the rest of us, we who are not feminists, who make up the majority of the human race, by the way, the more you aggress against us, the more we will have to do something about it. We're going to have to respond to it in some way. But remember, you are the aggressor. The rest of us didn't ask for feminism, didn't ask for all of feminism's lies, didn't ask for all the innovations and social engineering schemes that feminism introduced into the world. And we didn't ask for it, and we didn't know what was going on because you did it on the sly behind our backs. You bushwhacked us. So add treachery, the element of treachery and sneakery, to the element of aggression. Yeah, feminism is the problem, and people who are not feminists, who want no part of feminism, want no part of what feminism has created in the world, and want to begin to reclaim the world from all the rack and ruin that feminism has created. Um, People like that, and I include myself among them, people like that are more and more getting together and talking and making plans what to do about feminism and what to do about the feminist problem. And feminists, if you want to come against us and try to shut us down, that's just more aggression, and you are heaping more burning coals upon your heads, and you're digging yourself in deeper, and you're creating more anti-feminism in the world and creating more enemies for yourselves. So if you want my advice, best thing you can do is to take a chill pill and back off and leave non-feminist people alone to talk about reality as they see it and sort things out for themselves. Now, we've had half a century to listen to you guys, and I think we've heard enough. I don't care if you listen to us or not, but we're going to listen to us, and that's what we care about. And don't you try to stop us from talking. In conclusion, feminists, don't be the problem, don't be the aggressor. Share the world with the rest of the world. Hey, let's move right ahead here. Cue number 2 on your cue list. And this looks like a story from the Washington Examiner. It's something on the theme of campus rape or campus rape culture. Let's pull that up. Campus serial rapist survey debunked. One of the most widely cited and uncritically questioned surveys on campus sexual assault has just unraveled. No, it's not yet another 1 in 5 study which purports to show that 1 in 5 women are victims of sexual assault in college. This one claims to show that the majority of campus rapes were perpetrated by a small number of repeat offenders. Okay, did you catch that? A small number of repeat offenders. And the significance of that will become apparent here soon. The study, authored by David Lisak, was first questioned last year by Slate's Emily Yoff, who pointed out that the study's respondents were not limited to college students and couldn't be used as a representative sample of national college students. Now, Reason contributor Linda M. LeFauve takes an incredibly detailed look at just how flawed Lisak's study truly is. And here in the article is a link to that incredibly detailed look at just how flawed Lisak's study truly is. So you can read that incredibly detailed article on a different website. But let's go on with the article here. The most damning evidence LeFauve presents is that Lisak's study, which has since been used to claim that students accused of campus sexual assault are probably potential serial rapists, has nothing to do with campus sexual assault. Okay, stop right there. If you get hauled into a kangaroo star chamber on your campus on the accusation of rape, they've got you in their sights as a potential serial rapist. Not only did you theoretically rape one person, they're kind of thinking that maybe you raped a whole bunch of people or planned to do so. I think that adds a little spice to things there, doesn't it? Nothing about the studies from which he repurposed data depended on survey respondents being students or acts they reported taking place while in college. Nothing in the report protocol indicates prospective respondents were even asked whether they were students when they agreed to complete very personal surveys in exchange for $3. LeFauve wrote. There is not a single statement in the paper about assaults taking place on or near a campus. There is not a single reference to the campus environment. Okay? Nothing about colleges in this study of college sexual violence. Lisak didn't even complete original research. He based his findings on data presented in 4 other studies. When LeFauve asked Lisak about those other studies, he couldn't recall their topics or even who authored them. Lisak has also claimed at various times that he conducted follow-up interviews with some of the subjects of his study. This seems improbable, as the surveys conducted in his study were apparently anonymous. When LeFauve asked Lisak how he was able to conduct follow-up interviews with anonymous respondents, he hung up on her. Lisak's severely flawed study has contributed to the enactment of many draconian campus sexual assault policies that presume guilt based solely on an accusation. His study, like the dubious 1 in 5 studies, are creating an atmosphere in which false accusations are acceptable and misread romantic signals are elevated to charges of rape. Yeah, and that, I should say, in a quick aside, is the essence of the whole yes means yes philosophy, to boost the possibility that romantic signals will be misread. Lisak has even said in the past that every accusation should be viewed and treated as an opportunity to identify a serial rapist. Oh boy, they don't just want to accuse you of rape, they want to accuse you of multiple rapes. Think about that next time you plan to go to college. And they have been. Colleges, under pressure from the Obama administration, are eviscerating due process rights for accused students in order to appear tough on campus sexual assault. There's that ambiguous term, sexual assault. Does that mean rape? Does it mean quasi rape? Does it mean groping? Does it mean, oh, I don't know, telling a dirty joke in somebody's presence? Hard to know what sexual assault really means. This is feminist language here. And it's not difficult to see why. If one believes that 20% of college women will be raped by a small number of serial rapists, and that very few of those women are lying, then there's a good chance that each new accused student is a serial rapist in waiting. Okay? Yep. Serial rapist in waiting. So that's like that 90% of rapes that never get reported. That's their way of saddling you with all the rapes that don't get reported. If any part of that were true, then perhaps the extreme measures being taken to remove due process in favor of more convictions would be warranted. Stop right there. I'm going to disagree. No, it would not be warranted. Extreme measures to remove due process under any conditions would not be warranted. Okay, I'm surprised that the author said this, but I couldn't let that go by without saying something about it. All right, but time and time again, we see the 1 in 5 studies fall apart due to sketchy methods and leading questions. Yes, those surveys are just a fabric of leading questions, like, did you have sex with somebody after they gave you alcohol? That sort of thing. We see the claims that just 2% of accusations crumble under scrutiny, and now we see the idea that campuses are swarming with serial rapists has also collapsed. Yet all of this is ignored by the activists and politicians who have a stake in the issue and are dead set on passing more and more legislation to show they are on the right side. And I would add in brackets after that, of history. It doesn't say that in the article, but I couldn't resist inserting that to show they are on the right side. In the meantime, these flawed studies will continue to be used to justify passing draconian legislation and policies that ruin innocent lives. You know, that's what burns me up more than anything, to see innocent lives ruined. The people that are behind all of this don't give a crap about innocent lives and whether those lives are ruined, especially if those innocent lives are innocent male lives. And that's the end of the article on the WashingtonExaminer.com. And we go next to Q number, which Q number was that? Oh, yes, this is Q number 3. Also in the Washington Examiner. And this is on the same theme. It just segues right over from the article I just read. This is again on the theme of campus rape hysteria, feminist rape culture. No, 1 in 5 women have not been raped on college campuses. A shock claim that 1 in 5 women on college campuses have been sexually assaulted has been parroted by politicians, including President Obama, who are hoping to score points defending women in a supposed war against them. Yep, the war against women, there you go. Women commit half of all domestic violence. Men commit half of all domestic violence. Actually, if we drill down into the fine points, into the nuances, depending on how you look at it, women actually commit more domestic violence in some cases. But that's a topic for another day. Anyway, suppose war against women, but in reality, this claim is misleading at best. Misleading, meaning that it leads you in the wrong direction, like away from the truth. It has been debunked multiple times, but apparently the paranoia it causes is just too good to let facts get in the way. So I'm going to debunk it again. You know, I don't know if paranoia is the right word there. Paranoia implies at least that you're sincerely afraid of something. And I can't see where sincerity is the motivating factor behind most of this. I think there's something that's not explainable by stupidity, if you know what I mean. But anyway, maybe there is some paranoia in the mix there somewhere. The statistic comes from a 2007 campus sexual assault study conducted by the National Institute of Justice, a division of the Justice Department. The researchers made clear that the study consisted of students from just 2 universities, but some politicians ignored that for their talking point, choosing instead to apply the small sample across all U.S. college campuses. The CSA study was actually an online survey that took 15 minutes to complete, and the 5,446 undergraduate women who participated were provided a $10 Amazon gift card. Men participated too, but their answers weren't included in the 1 in 5 statistic. Sort of like that old canard about every 13 seconds a woman gets hit, but then they neglect to tell you that every 13 seconds a man gets hit too. Anyway, moving along. If 5,466 sounds like a high number, it's not. The researchers acknowledged that it was actually a low response rate. Another limitation on the CSA study, inherent with web-based survey, is that the response rates were relatively low, the researchers said. Although the response rates were not lower than what most web-based surveys achieve, they are lower than what we typically achieve using a different mode of data collection. For example, face-to-face interviewing. 19% of women who responded to the survey said they had experienced some kind of sexual assault, either attempted or completed. 12.6% reported attempted sexual assaults, 13.7% reported completed sexual assaults, and some women reported both. You know, I wish they would just be clear and say 13.7% reported completed rape or reported rape. But a lot of those responses have to do with how the questions were worded. For example, the CSA study asked women whether they had sexual contact with someone while they were unable to provide consent or stop what was happening because you were passed out, drugged, drunk, incapacitated, or asleep. The survey also asked the same question about events that you think but are not certain happened, are not certain that they happened. But then that gets counted as sexual assault. That's open to a lot of interpretation, as exemplified by a 2010 survey conducted by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which found similar results. Like the CSA survey, the CDC survey had a low response rate and non-representative sample, as Christina Hoff Summers of the American Enterprise Institute notes. No one interviewed was asked if they'd been raped or sexually assaulted. That seems like the way to do it. Just say, have you been raped? Have you been sexually assaulted? Let them be the judge of their own experience. To me, that seems like the right way to do it. But I guess I don't think the way these people do. Instead of such straightforward questions, the CDC determined whether the responses indicated sexual violation, Hoff Summers said. They can't have people be the judge of their own experience, I guess. The CDC survey also asked a question about sexual contact while drunk, high, drugged, or passed out and unable to consent. The question did not make it clear that it applied only to instances of unwanted sexual contact. Now, 61.5% of the women the CDC projected as rape victims in 2010 experienced what the CDC called, quote, alcohol and drug facilitated penetration, Hoff Summers said. If a woman was unconscious or incapacitated, then every civilized person would call it rape. Okay, I agree. But what about sex while inebriated? Hoff Summers continued. I mean, few people would say that intoxicated sex alone constitutes rape. Indeed, a non-trivial percentage of all customary sexual intimacy, including marital sex, probably falls under that definition. Glenn Kessler of the Washington Post, who fact-checked the CSA study back in May, pointed out that similar studies from 1997 produced different results based on how the questions were worded. He cited an NIJ fact sheet, which noted that researchers have been unable to determine the precise incidence of sexual assault on American campuses because the incidence found depends on how the questions are worded and the context of the survey. And actual reported crimes are much lower. Bureau of Justice Statistics data indicates that in 2012, the rate of rapes and sexual assaults was 1.3 per 1,000 Americans ages 12 and up. Okay, and 1.3 per 1,000 Americans ages 12 and up. And this is across society, just everywhere across the board, not just campuses. And campuses are safer places to be than out in the community. You stand a better chance of not getting raped on a college campus than just about anywhere else in the world. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Even though the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network estimates that 60% of all sexual assaults go unreported, the difference between actual reports and the oft-cited study results is even greater, casting even more doubt on their veracity. Nevertheless, 8 senators are using that false statistic to push legislation aimed at combating campus sexual assault, and their bill calls for an annual online survey that would use methodology similar to the other surveys that have already been discredited as inaccurate or misleading. Criminologists James Allen Fox and Richard Moran warned Sunday in USA Today that this new survey would be harmful for all colleges. Well, certainly harmful for students in those colleges. What makes this ill-conceived survey of such concern is that the results are to be publicly released. Publicly released. Did you catch that? With rates reported for individual schools. This carries significant implications for admissions and retention rates, as it is based on data of highly questionable validity, Fox and Moran wrote. Indeed, flawed data are sometimes worse than no data at all. Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly with that last statement. So far, of the 8 Senate co-sponsors of the legislation, only Senators Marco Rubio and Chuck Grassley have answered questions from the Washington Examiner about the bill's required annual survey. But their responses did not provide assurances that the surveys would be objective and non-political. The truth is, we don't know how many women have been sexually assaulted on America's college campuses, but legislation based on overblown statistics won't lead to safer campuses, just more fear. There you go. So we started off with the Good Men Project about some person in Australia trying to blame men for violence in society and trying to make young boys feel guilty for it. And then we led through stories about rape and about how fraudulent that whole racket is. So I see a connecting thread here. I see a theme. Let's go on to cue number 4. Yes means yes policy coming under fire from judges. Judges across the country are saying no to the yes means yes standard of affirmative consent for date rape. The legality of the standard, adopted on California and New York campuses by state legislatures and in effect on numerous other colleges throughout the country, is in question following a series of recent rulings that cite a lack of due process. These decisions are harbingers, said John Banshoff, a professor at George Washington University Law School and a public interest lawyer. It does take time for new ideas to percolate through the system. Under the standard, the accused, typically a male, has to prove he obtained consent, even if neither party remembers what happened. The standard forces the accused to prove his innocence rather than be proven guilty. You can't take the fifth on this one. Proponents of the yes means yes law claim it's a necessary step to combat sexual assaults, which some studies suggest occur at a high frequency on campuses. Well, we've just recently here torn apart those studies. But judges in California, Tennessee, and Virginia say it goes too far. A student expelled from the University of California, San Diego, had an unfair hearing, Superior Court Judge Joel M. Pressman ruled in July. The John Doe accused in the case said he was unable to cross-examine his accuser and other witnesses. He also said he was forced to submit questions to a hearing panel in advance, and many of his questions were then rejected. Pressman agreed this was a violation of his due process rights. Duh. A student found guilty of sexual misconduct by the University of Tennessee because he couldn't prove he obtained verbal consent had his verdict overturned by a Chancery Court judge on August 4th. A student expelled from Washington and Lee University for alleged sexual misconduct will be allowed to continue with his gender-biased lawsuit against the school, U.S. District Court Judge Norman Moon ruled on August 8th. In the lawsuit, a Title IX officer at the school is quoted during a presentation she gave to the woman who later accused John Doe. The Title IX officer is alleged to have said, "regret equals rape," and went on to state her belief that this point was a new idea everyone, herself included, is starting to agree with. Okay? The Title IX officer says regret equals rape. You have sex, you wish you hadn't, you can call it rape. She went on to state her belief that this point was a new idea, indeed, a new idea. That this point was a new idea everyone, herself included, is starting to agree with. Okay, everyone is starting to agree that if you have sex and you later wish you hadn't, then you have been raped. Everybody, everyone, it says here, is starting to agree with that. I don't know if everyone is starting to agree with that or not, but, well, no words necessary here. Shortly thereafter, an allegation of misconduct was launched against John Doe. The Title IX officer played a significant role in the investigatory process. Yes, John Doe had sex with some girl. The girl regretted having had sex with John Doe and decided, I think I'll call it rape. The Title IX officer apparently sees no problem with that. A right to due process at state universities may seem like a novel concept. Really? A right to due process does not seem like a novel concept in any context. But Banzhaf said the Fourth Amendment protection was never intended to apply solely to the court system. The Constitution trumps everything else, he said. So no matter what the Department of Education or Department of Justice suggest, regardless of what a state's statute provides or what the university decides, the Constitution trumps it all. The Supreme Court somewhat settled the due process question in its 1976 Matthews versus Eldridge decision, a case cited by Chancellor Carroll L. McCoy in the University of Tennessee decision. The fundamental requirement of due process is the opportunity to be heard at a meaningful time and in a meaningful manner, McCoy wrote. Due process is flexible and calls for such procedural protections as the particular situation demands. Banzhaf explains that means that not every element of protection for the accused must be provided in every case. A minimal amount of procedural protection, such as the right to cross-examine witnesses, must be provided in all cases, however. So there is a core of things that must be present in the name of due process, according to this judge here. The University of Tennessee announced on Monday that it would implement a new sexual misconduct policy to take effect on August 19th. The changes reportedly involve easy-to-read mandatory reporting charts and making prohibited conduct front and center in training manuals. Nothing about expanded due process is noted. That could change, however. The American Bar Association on August 4th adopted 3 resolutions focusing on campus assaults and gender-based violence. The American Bar Association adopted 3 resolutions focusing on campus assaults and gender-based violence. If the American Bar Association used the phrase gender-based violence, then I think we can safely assume that the American Bar Association has been, infused with feminist ideology. gender-based violence. That's a red flag of a phrase if I saw one. Some of the language includes assuring that the rights of those accused of such acts are recognized, respected, and protected. Well, good. These protections for the accused are vital from both a fairness perspective and a financial outlook, Bansaf said. Not only can universities be sued by those accused of assaults whose due process rights may have been violated, Bansaf added, but administrators can also be sued and possibly held individually liable. Colleges who are smart are going to look at these cases and say, maybe we should start thinking about this when we craft our policies, he said. End of article. So, we see a leapfrog effect happening. Started in California and it spread to Tennessee. And I see this trend continuing. Judges everywhere are calling the campus rape phenomenon, the campus rape politics into question. And that's good. And it started in California, as so many things do. And then it started hopscotching around the country. Well, let's just keep an eye on this and hope that this trend continues. So, while the feminist propaganda juggernaut keeps rolling, there is a counterforce that's also rolling. So we see two trends happening at the same time, moving in contrary directions. But then that's a typical thing in any kind of a revolutionary scenario. You know, the old order of things keeps moving and even gathering speed, while at the same time the revolution starts to gain traction. So we see all these contradictory things moving in different directions from each other. That's a transitional stage. So let's cross our fingers and keep our eye on things and hope for the best. And what do we got next? Cue number 5. Here I say in my notes, disregard cue number 5. For some reason, cue number 5 does not lead to the same web page that it originally did. It leads to something completely irrelevant, and I don't know why. So pretend it's not even there. Yep, just ignore cue number 5. Forget about cue number 5. Why it doesn't link to the same thing that it linked to a week ago, I can't tell you. Cue number 6. Cue number 6 was linked to cue number 5, and it's kind of an orphan there all by itself without cue number 5 to give it context. So go look at cue number 6 if you want to. It's an audio file, you know, that's up to you. Let's skip right ahead to cue number 7, an article from Spiked Online, a publication that halfway understands what the problem with feminism is, but still continues to promote a false narrative, namely the narrative of feminism versus the men's rights movement. That's the whole central story that everything revolves around. And yes, Spiked Online is promoting a false narrative when they promote that story. And we'll have to wean them away from it. God only knows how. Cue number 7. Let me get that up in my browser. Here we go. Feminism, the latest celebrity must-have. During a promotional interview for her role as Lady Seymour Worsley in BBC drama The Scandalous Lady W, actress and feminist Natalie Dormer didn't only celebrate feminism, she also urged young women to stop slagging off feminism on Twitter and spend time reading feminist literature instead. Well, has it occurred to her that the reason they're slagging off feminism on Twitter and in other places is because many of them have read feminist literature? I mean, that's why I slag off feminism. I have read a lot of feminist literature, and I've also looked at the behavior of feminists in the real world, and I put those two things together to get a complete picture of what feminism is. And on that basis, I commenced to slagging off feminism. And I like to think that a lot of people out there on Earth have followed a similar procedure when they slag off feminism. Although it does my heart good to see more and more people slagging off feminism, and everybody get out there and slag off feminism. To continue with the article, it seems female celebs, meaning celebrities, feel under enormous pressure to proclaim their feminist credentials. And that's what I've heard. They feel under enormous pressure, and I wish some of them would stand up against that pressure. In 2012, Katy Perry told Billboard, "I am not a feminist, but I do believe in the strength of women." However, after a 2-year-long backlash, wow, they kept after her for 2 years. Why didn't she just stand up and say, "Hey, feminist, fuck off," and see if that would have shut them up? After a 2-year-long backlash, Perry gave in to her critics with an enthusiastic conversion to the cult of feminism. A feminist? Yeah, actually. Pop icons Beyonce and Taylor Swift have also been criticized for skirting around the loaded title. But instead of sticking to their non-feminist guns, Taylor did a U-turn and argued that, quote, "misogyny is ingrained in people from the time they are born." In other words, they hauled her down in the cellar and brainwashed her. And Beyonce decided to light up her stage performance with the F word in capital letters. I think we've all seen that one. Feminism is the new moral orthodoxy. No, it's not the new moral orthodoxy. It's been the moral orthodoxy for some years now. I wouldn't quite call that new, but that's what it says in the article. Feminism is the new moral orthodoxy. Reject it and you are a woman hater. Mm-hmm. Criticize it and you're confused or ignorant. Despite its supposed focus on women's equality, feminists guard their cliquey politics with such force that it sometimes feels like you're back in school and wearing the wrong shade of pink. Let's back up a little bit. Feminism is a new moral orthodoxy. Reject it and you are a woman hater. So if you quietly say, "I'm not a feminist," that's it. You are by definition a woman hater. Well, I can confirm this. I have spoken with enough feminists now, or communicated with enough feminists now, to know that if you simply say you're not a feminist, well, you're a pretty bad person. You don't even have to go the extra mile and slag off feminism or attack feminism. You just say you're not a feminist, and that puts you in pretty bad water with a lot of feminists. They resent you simply for existing while not feminist. That's something you need to bear in mind. And as the drama begins to speed up and heat up, that fact will rise more and more to the surface and more into the light of day. It will become more and more obvious that simply not being a feminist or saying no thank you to feminism, well, they hate you for that. And they will find a way to poison your existence simply because you're not a feminist. Right now, they've got their hands full dealing with the men's rights activists and anti-feminists and people like that. But just not being a feminist, quietly not being a feminist and quietly living your life, they'll get around to you also eventually. You can depend on that. Feminism is a new moral orthodoxy. Reject it and you are a woman hater. Criticize it and you're confused or ignorant. Despite its supposed focus on women's equality, feminists guard their cliquey politics with such force that it sometimes feels like you're back in school and wearing the wrong shade of pink. When writer and student Lauren Southern, who recently appeared at the Slut Walk in Edmonton, along with Nick Redding and his posse up there, When writer and student Lauren Southern posted a picture on social media stating that she was not a feminist, she received an onslaught of hate mail, including messages from women who claimed that her picture had made them so upset they were physically sick. There you go. There you go. Reveal the persistent behavior of feminism's participants. And this is persistent behavior. It persists. It doesn't change. This is what they do. This is how they behave. Folks, this is feminism. And my hat is off to Lauren Southern. She, unlike these pop icons and movie stars, she stood up and continues to stand up against them. Good on her. That's what I call a strong, empowered woman. Dormer says her new role as the promiscuous Lady Seymour will be a challenge for us ignorant viewers. I think this will be the biggest hurdle for a modern audience to get over, that women in the 18th century were their husband's property. Hang on a minute. Anyone who has been in school long enough for half a history lesson will know that women have it a lot better today than they did a few hundred years ago. Furthermore, in a society obsessed with raising awareness of inequality, it is hard to believe that women don't know their own history of inequality. Okay, well, history is debatable. History nowadays is looked at through a feminist lens. So you got to take feminist history with a grain of salt. Was life really so terrible for women 2 or 3 centuries ago? I'm not disputing that life sucked for women and for everybody 2 or 3 centuries ago, but was it really what the feminists tell us? I think we're entitled to be skeptical about that. Not making any claims right now, but we are entitled to be skeptical. We are entitled to think for ourselves and to ask questions, even inconvenient questions. All right, I enjoy a good period drama, and I might well watch The Scandalous Lady W, but not because it will educate me on the trials of womanhood or make me appreciate the fact that I'm not forced into courses. I grew up reading Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge, in which the main character sells his wife and daughter for 5 guineas. I studied the suffragettes at secondary school. I also studied more feminist criticism than I care to remember during my time at university. Yes, as I too have read that kind of literature more than I care to remember. In fact, curricula and courses are making a concerted effort to foreground women's history and female figures to make our kids as PC as possible. You see, they're doing this for our own good. They're moralizing us for our own good, instilling these things into us for our own good. Okay? The idea that women, as Dormer says, simply don't get feminism because they haven't read bell hooks is extremely insulting. Well, okay, I have read bell hooks, and reading bell hooks factored into my assessment of what feminism is. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Women who decide to bend the feminist badge are actually making a progressive point. Contemporary feminism is defined by a cult of victimhood. Contemporary feminism? I think it's been that way from day one. But anyway, contemporary feminism is defined by a cult of victimhood, one which demands that women cry on social media about their faux daily oppression at the hands of the opposite sex and beg for the intervention of a protective state. Of course, men are not invited to do any of that. A woman rejecting feminism in all its drippy glory should be celebrated. Young women have it good, and no woman in the UK is born into inequality on the basis of her gender. I'm sorry, on the basis of her sex. I hate that word gender. Problems more significant than catcalling arise later in life, but abortion, motherhood, and household chores aren't as easy to hashtag as nipple piercings and tampons. Dormer revealed her desire to celebrate the lamentations of the past when she said, I mean, only 230 years ago in this country, a woman was the property of her husband. A lot of dodgy stuff went on 230 years ago, and 230 years is actually quite a long time. Humanity has developed and progressed a phenomenal amount in the space of a decade, let alone 2 centuries. But feminists want to live in the past. Instead of fighting for more freedom, they argue for less. In the past 2 years, feminists, well, pardon me, less for men, chiefly less for men, and more freedom of the most destructive kind, stupid kind, for women. In the past 2 years, feminist campaigns have inspired the banning of songs, comedians, club nights, and newspapers, called for state intervention in advertising, and for sterilized speech to eliminate words and phrases that supposedly constitute everyday sexism. Current feminism is the antithesis of freedom. It demands that women reject public life and live in a protective fantasy world. I won't be shut down by anyone, and I certainly don't need to read the vagina monologues to know that I am not a feminist. And the author of this article is Ellen Whalen. Now, the reader comments were interesting. I'd like to share one comment in particular that I thought was brilliant. This is by a commenter who goes by the name of Aquinas. That's as in Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas says, in reference to the author, Whalen, what's her name again? Whalen, Ellen Whalen, or Ella Whalen. That's the author of the article. So the commenter Aquinas says, Whalen claims she is not a feminist. What she means, of course, is that she is a true feminist, but that the latest wave of feminists has betrayed the revolution. If Whalen wants to know what a non-feminist thinks, here are a few points. This is good. You're going to enjoy this. Any study of history that concentrates on the relationship between two groups and ignores other relationships and how they all fit within an overall system is just plain bad history and will inevitably lead to paranoia. There is no quote-unquote women in history as a discrete group with homogeneous characteristics. Aristocrat women in the past lived a privileged existence compared with the vast majority of men, and at the same time they identified with aristocrat men far more than with ordinary women. Slave women had far more in common with slave men than with free women. Laws banning women from carrying out certain roles must be understood in the same way that other laws proscribed which men could carry out which tasks. That's so good, I want to read it again. Laws banning women from carrying out certain roles, got that? Must be understood in the same way that other laws proscribed which men could carry out which tasks. Very illuminating, very insightful. I love that. Similarly, no men in the past thought that considering the murder of women, similarly, no men in the past thought that considering the murder of women far more immoral than the murder of men was any kind of unjust discrimination. And yet that's just what feminism wants to promote now. Harms done to women, bad things done to women, somehow rates higher on the scale than the same bad thing happened to men. And this is saying that in the past, men to some point agreed with that. Reading on, man is a classificatory animal, and the world has always been organized in a taxonomical way. The idea that women in the past have been oppressed is just not borne out by the evidence. Oppression is a subjective emotion that only those affected by the circumstances can legitimately claim to feel. I love this. Oppression is a subjective emotion that only those affected by the circumstances can legitimately claim to feel. This makes me think of all those rape surveys that don't come out and just say, have you been raped or have you been sexually assaulted? They ask a bunch of tricky leading questions, and then the survey taker decides if they've been raped or sexually assaulted. All right, oppression is a subjective emotion that only those affected by the circumstances can legitimately claim to feel. It is not for modern women to say women in the past were treated unfairly. It is only for past women to make that claim. And until the 19th century, almost no women expressed any feeling of oppression. At least not that we have any major records of. Okay. The truth is that they consented to the social arrangements of the time and thought their place in society was perfectly adequate. No woman in the Middle Ages thought it was unfair that she couldn't vote, and male peasants thought the same way about their own lack of power. Stop right there. In the Middle Ages, there was no such thing as voting. I mean, the concept of voting was from Mars in the Middle Ages. Let's see. No woman in the Middle Ages thought it was unfair that she couldn't vote, and male peasants thought the same way about their own lack of power. Quite the opposite. They would have thought it a ludicrous idea. You say voting, you say electoral politics to a peasant in the Middle Ages, they wouldn't have one fucking clue what the hell you were talking about. Electoral politics is a very, very modern innovation in this world. It's hardly even 2 centuries old. Feminism, like Marxism, are ignorant and Manichaean readings of history that treat some groups like women or the proletariat as living separate realities to the rest of the world and are obsessed with power to the point that they cannot see any other impulse behind human action. Where one sees historical materialism, the other sees hormones, and where one uses capitalism as the big boogeyman, the other uses patriarchy. Modern feminism is therefore not an aberration. It's the natural offspring of a wholly pernicious idea that has poisoned relations between men and women, understands nothing of human psychology, and has given us a most embarrassing cultural output in the shape of women's studies. Next time Whalen thinks mankind has progressed phenomenally, intellectually, and morally, she should visit a university. End of comment. Bravo. Every word in that comment is after my own heart. A lot of it sounds like something I might have written. But there it is. So go there, follow that link to that article, and you will see that comment. I think it's still near the top of the stack in the reader comments. And I would encourage anybody out there to take that comment and copy and paste it into a text file on your own computer and keep it and read it and study it and share it around. It's a gem. It is perfect. In fact, I will tell you right now, the only reason I read the article is so I could read this reader comment directly after it. Anyway, all right, so celebrities, especially female celebrities, are afraid to come out and say they're not feminist. Well, I wish some of them would muster the courage to do that. I wish some of them would act like strong, empowered, liberated women and tell feminism where to shove it. I mean, use some of that empowerment which feminism has given them to tell feminism to fuck off. Okay? And when I say feminism, of course, I mean feminism as I define it, not the way feminists themselves would define it, because, of course, what they say doesn't count. What they say has counted too long they've had their day on the podium. They've been on the podium for the last half century. It's time for other voices to be heard. We're getting pretty tired of feminism telling us what feminism is and telling us what reality is and telling us what we are. And we need to flip the script around. We need to turn the tables on that game. And that's what we aim to do. So, yeah. Just wanted to share all that, especially that last reader comment. I loved it, and I hope you loved it as much as I did. And that looks like that's the end of our cue list. And looking through my show notes here, I think I've just about covered everything I want to cover. I gave my little speeches, my little rants. I read off some articles and commented on them. And yeah, I think we've had a good show here. We've gone for an hour and a half. We've got a half hour left. You know what? Let's wrap it up. This has been Vanguard Report, episode number 60. I am Fielbogen. Nick Redding was not with me tonight. He'll be back next week, hopefully. So everybody, take care. Remember, feminism is what we say it is. We don't care what they say it is. We got eyes. We can look at the world and we can think and we can form our own conclusions. We can jolly well see what feminism is. And we're going to say it. We're going to say it as we see it. Feminism is what we say it is. We have a special epistemic advantage due to our non-feminist standpoint. Feminism is what we say it is. If you're not a feminist, that means you're a person who just says no to feminism. All right? Because you've looked at feminism, you have decided independently in your own mind what feminism is, and you've decided that you want no part of it. It's not for you. And therefore, you classify yourself as non-feminist. And if the feminists, want to come back at you and give you any grief for it, then you'll have to up the ante a little bit, raise the stakes a little bit, and turn into an anti-feminist. Feminist aggression will provoke non-feminist counter-aggression. That's how the game works from here on out. So, one more time, never forget, feminism is what we say it is, and we will go on saying what feminism is, whether the feminists like it or not. Yeah, there's a new sheriff in town now. Feminism is what we say it is. Everybody, have a great week, and I'll see you again next week on the Vanguard Report for episode number 61. Bye.